One of the hardest things for investors to do is resist the urge to do something. This week we'll talk about controlling your financial world and letting go of the urge to control the financial world. Every minute, every day, every week, data, sentiment readings, all these things bombarding those people who are trying to stay informed with investors. And as we've talked about before, it's very difficult to know what to do, or in many cases not do with this, any of this information. So we want to lay out a few keys to success again this week, as well as share some updates around what is the data telling you and what the heck should you be doing with that data. Before we get into that, I think it's important to really understand the backdrop of what's going on. Number one is people's biggest fear, and you see this in study after study after study, even more than the fear of death, is the fear of running out of money. Secondly, most people, a lot of your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, are not even remotely prepared for retirement. Bloomberg put out some survey data this week that showed over 20% of Americans 59 and older have no retirement savings. Most calculations around the shortfall for retirement savings put that number at close to $7 trillion shortfall. So while those people may not be in the markets, that noise is certainly surrounding the markets and investors, creating a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. You couple that with the fact that, as we've talked about before, our brains are literally hardwired to confuse financial danger with mortal danger, which triggers all sorts of emotions and instincts around fight or flight. It's just a lot of cards stacked against investors to find that path to success. Every week, we're certainly sharing within these commentaries a lot of data, insights, and it would be perfectly natural for people to feel like, well, I've got to do something with this information. Well, let's talk about three key things that we think are imperative to, again, controlling your financial world and letting go of that pressure, that anxiety to try to control the financial world. Key number one is know your financial world. With regularity, people come in and say, I don't really know what our budget is. I don't really know what we spend. And that's perfectly natural because people are just busy living their lives, taking care of their families, working their jobs, and they don't necessarily sit down and detail all of that out. Even more than that, they very rarely create a financial framework for how they're going to make decisions. And so it's the size of the emotions of the moment that they use to determine whether something is a need or a want or a wish. It's only in retrospect that we realize, man, we've been trading a lot of things that were nice, but we're more in that hope-wish category for some things that we needed to get right. Kids' college, retirement savings, etc., as opposed to the fun trip that the family wanted to take. Number two is data. What do we do with all this data that's coming out? Do we just literally stick our head in the sands? I think that's sometimes implied by some. Do we use it to try to deduce what's going to happen in the future to make a call? That's certainly on the other extreme of things that want to happen. We talk about it here at 10 Capital primarily from a preparedness standpoint. If we go back to that backdrop, there are all these things that are already trying to hype up our emotions, and we're already wired to take a lot of that data and probably make it even worse or less constructive to decision making. So what do we do with this? Well, again, it's all about how you think of it. That data, staying informed is certainly important. It's an important tool, but how it's important is to, again, quell your emotions. Understanding, again, what might happen so that there's a less of a chance of surprise. Not to predict, not to say, I know which one of these 3 or 4 things may happen, but to understand with at least a little bit more clarity what the range of possible outcomes are to, again, feel prepared. Second is then some positioning. A lot of times, if you're coming from that, hey, data is there to predict as opposed to prepare, then that gets reflected in the portfolio. People making a big call on a certain stock or to get all in or out of the stock market, rather than, again, thinking about it from a preparedness standpoint, understanding there's going to be a range of possible outcomes and having the portfolio reflect that with a range of diversified investment options within it. So where are we at today in terms of this data? If you're interested in point number 1, come in, sit down, go through our planning process. As to points 2 and 3, it's everywhere. Sentiment has been whipping back and forth from some bullish readings to bearish. Different surveys are showing different data, all of which again is back to the overarching point: confusing, not indicative, not at an extreme level that would help shift the probability strongly in one direction or the other. Similarly, data is the same way. You've had a lot of data, most notably ISM manufacturing, even ISM service data coming in contraction or right on the verge of contraction, very recessionary-like. You got other PMI data, purchasing manager data coming out, particularly globally, very, very strong. All this is just to say this is not the time to, again, over-position or allocate to any one thing, but to be prepared. The good news, as we've shared before, is there's probably as many good options out there for people as there has ever been. And while a lot of people will tell you in kind of that fight or flight response, hey, cash is king or cash is trash, we'd come back to cash flow. Whether you need that for your needs of today or you want to use it to dollar cost average for your hopes of tomorrow. And along that line, look at things that you haven't been able to look at for a while. Certain cash alternatives, longer duration bonds are again attractive for the first time in maybe a decade plus. All again, which goes into that diversified portfolio built very pragmatically around your financial world and not so much about what the financial world may do coming down in the days, weeks, and months ahead. With that, this is what we're here to do. Love helping you with all the time. If you've got any questions about any of these aspects, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.